What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show with me, Sean Sheehan, here on Sherdog.com. And today we're going to be looking ahead to PFL's second event this year. But before we do that, we must tell you that BetUS.com is offering our listeners an incredible 125% bonus on their deposits for UFC Fight Night Font versus Ferreira. Use the code Sherdog and get $2,500 in extra money to make Fight Night even better. At BetUS.com, you can not only bet in each fight, but they have loads of awesome parlay bets to choose from too. Bet live during the fights and your winnings are paid within hours. Start the fight at BetUS.com. Use the code Sherdog. Alright, everyone, let's get into the preview for next week. But I also want to do, maybe not a review of last week. I have another podcast. It might already be out at this stage, or else it's coming out, kind of reviewing the weekend's action. I'll talk a little bit about PFL's fights in that. I want to talk about all around PFL in terms of what I think changed, just briefly here, but what I think stayed the same from last year as well, and what I would love to change. It was all very similar, I think, to last year. With PFL, you're kind of expecting something different. You're expecting a few changes, but we didn't really see it, which is not necessarily a bad thing, I suppose. If you like PFL, you'll be happy that they didn't change it. If you don't, you probably won't be happy. But look, in general, there's a lot of things I could pick out with PFL that I would love to change. But in general, I like the fact that they're a little bit different. You know, I like the fact they're not the same as UFC. They try to do different stats. Now, I'm not the biggest stats fan in the world, but they like to make it part of the show. They like to do, even with their judging malarkey, which I'll get to in a second. It is something different, and something different is what we need in MMA. We don't want to watch a UFC light production, and to be fair to PFL, that's something that they aren't. You know, with the format, obviously the fights, with the people kind of they have signed, and a few of the kind of the up and comers they have that go against the people they've signed that maybe we know, I think makes it very good. I also think one thing, and we'll see this throughout the season, and maybe it's a thing we will talk about as we go, but I think some of the signings they've made, especially one or two we're going to see on this card, and even Ireland's own Miles Price will be fighting Ante in a couple of weeks. I really like their signings. I think their signings have been good. They've signed some exciting people, some people maybe who've been on the verge of the UFC, or maybe you would think the UFC might sign down the road. PFL have got in there first, and they've signed some of those people, and I think that's very good. So all in all, I think it's a good start to the PFL season. Now, a few issues I would have. The production at the start especially wasn't great. Over here, sorry, as I nearly choked to death there. Someone's been sent from the PFL to get me. But no, I'd be nice to them. Before I get into the negatives, maybe it's on Channel 4 here now in Ireland and the UK, which is great. It just, as you probably know over in the States as well, if you're watching this from there, it's just a little bit easier when it's on TV, when you can go, like we've a Skybox here. I'm not sure what you have over in the States and things, but you turn on the TV, you press, I think it's channel 138, and it's there. You can record it, it's there the next morning. You could do that with Sky, you could do that with some Bellator cards. Like Bellator make it very, very hard and very difficult to know what's on and know when to watch it and know, just in general, they make it hard, and they have for years. Now some of them, like 3 or 4 cards a year, maybe a little bit more, especially the European ones, they're easy to watch here in Ireland especially. But you have to stream, you have to cast, you have to do all of it. If your internet is down, which mine seems to be non-stop recently, it's a disaster. But PFL have made it so easy now. Now the prelims were online, which is fine. Everyone. Let's be realistic. We're going to have to deal with some of that. And they were playing at like 70% speed for the first hour. Hour around that. The first couple of fights. At which point I kind of just turned it off and was like, look, I'll come back to when it's working. And I came back and it was working, and I went back and I checked the fights and the knockouts, even though they kind of actually weren't fixed. But that's an issue. I think like Coachman's internet was down, which I can, I feel his pain there. But still, that's a bit unprofessional looking. Brett Okamoto's microphone wasn't working at one stage. I think the ring announcer's microphone wasn't working. So those sort of things is not something you'd really associate with PFL, because I've always thought PFL have done things very, very cleanly. Like, okay, everyone's going to have one issue. Like Bruce Buffer's mic hasn't worked before, and I'm not nitpicking here, but there were just so many examples on this opening card, and now I actually spoke to someone from PFL, and I pointed these things out, and they actually said, thanks very much, we'll fix them. And they, to be honest, they fixed them midway through the card, and they were grand for the rest of the card. But it's something when you're reviewing the show, when you're talking about the overall production, because I did mention last week as well, I think their production is pretty good. That was one issue. I think they sorted halfway through the card, and hopefully going forward that won't be an issue again. Look, I'll just quickly mention the whole the judging thing as well. First of all, with the judging, they're in Texas, and I think all these upcoming cards are in Texas. That at first is going to be an issue with judging, because look, I could get into an hour-long rant here about this alone, but the judging in Texas is not the same as the judging anywhere else. They haven't taken up the same rules. They don't get the same level of judges over there. I think PFL are just using all Texas judges as well, so not bringing in the likes of, a Chris Lee or a Ron McCarthy or a Sal D'Amato or a Brian Minor. No, that was the way it was last week. Maybe that will change going forward. We will see that way. That could be an issue going forward. That could be a real issue, and you could have people shouting robbery and everything. It's a thing that could happen, and probably will. The big issue though as well, I think, is this made up judging algorithm that they had that has absolutely nothing got to do with the actual judging criteria itself, but they use it as if it is the real criteria, and they use it as if this is a judge, an indication of who's winning a round or who's winning a fight, which it absolutely unequivocally is not. Look, the algorithm, whatever algorithm they have, who's making this? Wow, it's Sean O'Connell tries to explain it, and he seems to love it. I don't know if he's involved in it or whatever, but he seems to absolutely love this algorithm. And the way he explains it, it has very little to do with the actual judging criteria, because he's talking about like top position and everything like this, which is, we all know, has nothing to do with the criteria. So that's a thing that is very weird, and you would never ever get in any other sport, and that's in a very negative way. I'm saying that. The example I use, if you're playing two NFL teams playing, and the score is 21-3, right? And then that we know it's 21-3 because they got 3 touchdowns and a field goal or whatever it might be, right? That's how you get to 21-3. If someone's telling you, oh well, no, in our scoring criteria it's actually 28-14, you're like, well, it's not, because we saw them getting 3 touchdowns and we saw them getting 1 kick, so that's the scoring. Well, no, they had field position for 70%, so they actually get another 4 points. And this team actually, they returned the kick and they went 30 yards, and you get 4.3 points for that. It's like, it makes no sense. That's not how you score in American football, that's not how it works. It's literally the exact same thing as what I just said there. It's ludicrous, and the fact that they're using it is beyond ludicrous. I understand, as I said at the start of this, I understand them wanting to be different, and I appreciate them wanting to be different, but that is not them being different. That is just making up nonsense and putting it out there. The commentators putting it out there as if it is something we should actually listen to and take heed of. It's ludicrous and beyond ludicrous altogether. But look, that is my kind of thoughts on the first week of PFL in terms of the production and everything like that. Overall, I would give it a strong, B-, C+ with a lot of improvements still to come. But let's talk about next week's card. And before we do that, I must just tell you again quickly that UFC Fight Night Font versus Vera is more fun when you bet at BetUS.com. Use the code Sherdog and then get an incredible 125% bonus up to $2,500. Font at the moment is a clear favourite, so get in now or choose to bet via TKO to increase your winnings. At BetUS.com, you can make the fights even more fun by betting throughout the fights. Start the fight at BetUS.com and use that code Sherdog. Right, PFL number 2. There are some very, very good fights in this, some new up-and-comers. I talked about some new guys that they've signed, and I'm looking at some of them here. Even kicking off the card, Alejandro Flores versus Saba Bolaji, 20-3 versus 14-2-1. That should be a good fight. Then you have kind of the older crew of fighters as well, Shaman Moraes against Boston Salmon. Boston Salmon's only 11 fights, I think, into his career. You'd think he's been around a lot longer, but that I think that's a good fight. I think that's a good banger of a fight there. You have Ali Asayev as well. He's 9-0. He's coming back. He was the champion of PFL in 2019, wasn't it? Yeah, because they didn't do it 2020. 2020 version of the of this. Denis Goltsov as well is on the card, and he was a semi-finalist in the last 2 years, so 2019 and 2021. But Isaev is fighting Kilson Abreu, who's 20 fights into his career. It's a good matchup, but it's like I was very impressed last year with Bruno Cappelozza, who is headlining this card, who we'll get to in a second. I think it'd be very interesting. Obviously, Isaev wasn't on it in the tournament last year. He hasn't fought since he won the tournament back in 2019. So maybe that's a very exciting matchup we see towards the back end of the season, or maybe in the season. Who knows? I must ask someone, but I don't know. And maybe this is this is my own fault, but how did they make the matches? Like, did they just decide? I was talking to someone yesterday about it because it was kind of bugging me, but I didn't actually ask someone from PFL, and maybe I should do that. Like, did it just like match make normally? Did they decide like halfway through the season, this guy's going to fight this one? Like, why could Isaev and Cappelozza just meet like their next fight? I don't know. I don't understand how that works. But anyway, still, we'll see how that goes. The heavyweights are really kind of kicking into it this week. We've seen Ferreira against Jamelle Jones as well. And Goltsov is fighting Sam K, who is 8-5 in his career. He obviously has never fought in the PFL before, but he has a lot of fights over, and I think he's over is he in Australia or somewhere like that? So it's hard. I haven't been able to find too much of him. Not the best record in the world, so you wouldn't think it's going to be the toughest matchup in the world in terms of Goltsov here, who's done well over the last few years. But I think that heavyweight division is not bad in PFL, honestly, and I really like Cappelozza, and I think he's going to do well. Obviously, we'll talk about that again in a second. I might as well talk about the other heavyweight fight while we're on it. Ante Delija versus Matheus Scheffel. I believe I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Delija, we've seen him obviously fight a couple of times in the PFL before he got to the final last year and ended up losing to Bruno Cappelozza. I'm a fan of his style, to be honest. I think he's a very, very good fighter. He's long, he races in with strikes, but it's a good long jab as well. He's willing to clinch, willing to wrestle, very, very hard ground and pound. As well for a guy fighting out of the Croatian or Dutch kickboxing style, he can do it all. I think he's a very, very well-rounded fighter, and I think this matchup against Scheffel is very, very interesting. I watched a bit of Scheffel. I'm pronouncing him like the golfers, like Scheffel, Matheus Scheffel. He sounds very German for a fella with a Brazilian flag beside his name. But anyway, I watched a couple of his fights. He fought in Dana White Contender Series. I describe him by looking at him as a glitchy counter striker. He's one of these guys like, waiting all the time, boom, he hits you like that. He's very loose on the outside, very good athlete for the heavyweight. This is a heavyweight, isn't it? I'm not gone mad at my. Yeah, it is a heavyweight. Very, very good athlete, I think, for the heavyweight. I think that 15-7 record maybe doesn't show how good he is. Now, maybe the takedown, it's funny because you look at Delija and you think, and maybe I have actually kind of made this mistake before, sometimes you think he's going to be an all-out kickboxer, and sometimes he is, and sometimes he isn't. So I'll be interested to see how this looks. Like, I think both guys will back their striking in this, and I think it will be a striker matchup, and I think it'll be a fun striker matchup, honestly. Who comes out the better of it? I honestly don't know. I think it's hard to gauge Scheffel's I don't know, standing, I suppose, in PFL. We've seen Delija get to the very top last year, but this could be one of those ones that'd be interesting to see the price of the betting on this. This could be one that could be a shock, because Scheffel is dangerous and he hits hard, and if Delija does stand with him, look, he can hit hard as well, and he's big high kicks, and as I mentioned, that big rangy jab as well. It could be it could be a very, very interesting fight. So we'll see how that one goes. And the heavyweight division, I think, is wide open there. So we'll see how that fares in that. On the undercard, I'm actually kind of surprised these two fights are on the undercard. Kyle Bochniak versus Bubba Jenkins, and Chris Wade versus the two-time champion, Lance Palmer. First of all, to Bochniak versus Jenkins. Look, I don't think this is the toughest matchup in the world for Jenkins. He's a southpaw. Watching his fight against Lance Palmer from last year, I think it was, where he out-wrestled Lance. Very, very effective wrestling, very effective ground and pound as well. Although he's one of those guys, right, who just does enough with the ground and pound to have enough control, if you get me. And I think his ability to control guys, like if you can control Lance Palmer the way he did last year, you can probably control most people in the world with your wrestling. I love how effective as well his striking is. You know, Bubba is a guy who we've talked about before. I talked about him a couple of weeks ago when he was fighting over in or when he was fighting against Chris Wade last year, and he was fighting in the PFL last year, and about how sometimes he flatters to deceive, you know? Sometimes you're thinking, is he going to reach this level? Is he going to get there? And he doesn't. But I just feel like maybe this is the year for him, you know? Maybe he can put it all together. Maybe he can get off to a good start here against Kyle Bochniak and go on a run at 145 pounds. Bochniak... Look, I went back and I watched a couple of these fights in the UFC. Watched his fight against Jeremy Kennedy. He took him down within 2 seconds of that fight. And you'd be thinking of that, like, and maybe you don't need to watch anymore, to be honest, after you see that. Because it's going to be hard for him not to be taken down by Bubba Jenkins, if that makes sense. Like, I think Bubba Jenkins is a better wrestler than Jeremy Kennedy. Like, the problem with Bubba sometimes as well, he just doesn't go for it. You know, he'll stand back, he'll wait, he'll try to draw on the takedown. If you see a guy like Kyle Bochniak in front of you, I think you have to go and take him down. Like, Bochniak is a good right hand, he hits hard. He'll bring him, or he'll make issues for him in that way. But I think in the wrestling realm, I think Bubba Jenkins can absolutely dominate there, and I think he should. I think that's what he should be doing, and I think that is the sort of fighter that he needs to be in this one. Then for Lance Palmer versus Chris Wade, this is a very interesting matchup as well. Palmer too is a southpaw. He's a nice outside leg kick, but he's a wrestler. We all know that, heavy wrestler. Everything he looked for is wrestling, and when Bubba Jenkins out wrestled him there last year, there wasn't really much he could do outside of that. Now he is a good fighter and he can fight everywhere, but predominantly a wrestler. Whereas Chris Wade, I think he's a wrestler too, but he's added a lot more to his game. I think he kind of kicks more than he punches at times, which means he will end up in a wrestling match a lot of the time, especially if you're fighting someone like a Lance Palmer who will catch one of those kicks. But if he can land 3 or 4 of them first of all and do enough to stay away from the wrestling, it could be good for him. He's really strong, like a bull. He's a bull strength in him. Very good, not a very good striker, but a good striker who's willing. Look, you go back and you watch Chris Wade's fights, and he's usually more willing to throw than his opponents. And I think a lot of that has to do with his stability, with his wrestling, and with, I suppose, his confidence in his wrestling. So that's an interesting matchup. I'd be interested to see who can win the wrestling matchup. I think Lance Palmer might be slightly better. Now, I don't know what I'm basing that off of, really. It's a call that I just feel, having kind of watched both of them. And it's one that I suppose we will find out very, very quickly. I think on the feet, I think Chris Wade wins that fight, honestly, but we will see how it goes. I mentioned Goltsov, really looking forward to seeing him coming in here again. Can he go that one step further this time? Last year he won his opening 2 fights, then lost to Delija. The year before that he won 3 fights and ended up losing to Isaev in the final. So he's a guy who's there or thereabouts all the time, and he's fought some good lads back in the day, James McSweeney, Brett Rogers, Mike Kyle, so he's on the cusp. He's always on the cusp, and if someone slips over or someone gets injured or something, he might be the next guy coming through. So I'm looking forward to seeing where he goes and what he does. Him and Ferreira as well against Jamelle Jones. Ferreira 8-2 now. He beat Stuart Austin, who we'll talk about in a second. Last time out in the last season, and he's some good wins. He beat Jared Vandera, who we saw fighting a couple of weeks ago, and it'd be interesting to see where he goes this year. He's a lot of knockouts in his time, and Jamelle Jones, who he's fighting here, is I suppose you could call him a squat enough heavyweight at 6 foot for this division. He obviously got knocked out by Cappelozza last year, but has a win over Abreu, who was on the card as well. fought against some good guys. He's fought against William Knight, Mike Rodriguez and others throughout his career. So this is a big opportunity for him. And, a lot of these guys as well, maybe it's the last opportunity in the heavyweight division, because I think a lot of people, especially at the higher weight classes, are thinking about going to the PFL and thinking about, trying it out there after especially what Chufa stayed last year. So that'll be interesting to see where that goes. Right. Let's talk about the top two fights, because those are standouts to me. I'm going to talk about the main event first, and I'll come back to Brendan Loughnane, as I call him correctly, because that's how you say his name, is Loughnane. Bruno Cappelozza, honestly, is my favourite fighter in the PFL over the last couple of years. So athletic for heavyweight. I always say it every time I'm doing these shows. He reminds me of Junior Dos Santos. Sustained, fast, powerful attacks. Throws up more volume than JDS, but hits as hard. He hits like an absolute truck. And I just like him all around. I think he's good takedown defense. He can get on top when he needs. Has good ground and pound. Very fast, as I mentioned, on the outside, and powerful. Stuart Austin. Look at this guy's. The amount of people he's fought and the different names on his record. He has submitted Tom Aspinall. I watched that fight yesterday, and it was back in 2015, and Aspinall was maybe a different fighter back then, but he fought, Mark Godbeard, he's fought Dalcha Luganbulla, he's fought Johnny Walker, he's fought Satoshi Ishii, lost to Renan Ferreira in PFL in his only fight last year, but he's been around the block for a long time, made his debut all the way back in 2010, has been fighting as an amateur since 2007, coming out of the UK, so it's a big fight for him, and it's a tough fight, honestly. A very, very tough fight. Watching him, his head is up in the air. He kind of panics when striking. He does have nice hard leg kicks. To me, he's a very good wrestler. And obviously his submissions as well. He subs Tom Aspinall. I don't see a black belt at the time, Aspinall, but he comes from a BJJ background. And to sub him with a heel hook is a feat in itself. He's going to need to take Cappelozza down early and often, in my opinion. On the feet, he's just... I just don't think he's good enough to deal with someone like Cappelozza. Now, maybe the leg kicks are a thing here, but I don't think they are either. I think he's going to need... He's a very good athlete. I think he's going to need to use that athleticism to get Cappelozza to the ground, get on top of him, maybe submit him. That's his way to winning, but I don't think there are any prices up yet, but I would have him as a plus 500 underdog here. Maybe I would probably have minus 600, minus 700 for Cappelozza. I think he should be a massive favourite here, and I think he'll kick off the season in vicious fashion. I think he'll get the first round knockout here, so this is a good fight for Cappelozza to show himself off. And I would love to see him fight in the UFC, to be honest. I think he would mix it very well with a lot of those guys, but the same goes for a lot of people in PFL. You want to see him winning that $1 million. You want to see him getting that big payday, and they're just not going to get that in the UFC. So fair play to him, and fair play to him coming in here. Right, the last fight I'm going to talk about in the card, and I've gone through most of them here, but Brendan Loughnane against Ryoji Kudo. We know Loughnane, he's been around the scene for a very, very long time. Obviously fighting out of Manchester, and was on the Dana White Contender Series, beat Bilal J, who's had a relatively good career in the UFC since, but didn't get the call up because he took a takedown, or got a takedown actually in the last 10 seconds of the fight. In a fight he dominated and he won, and it was ridiculous, really. He has some great wins on the local scene. He's beaten, even back in the day, he's beaten the likes of Ali McLean, who was a good guy, beaten Mike Wilkinson and others like that. He fought Tom Duquesnoy. I was actually at that fight in Dublin back in 2015. Very close decision. The old travelling fans weren't too happy with it. There was a few bottles thrown in the Tree Arena and stuff like that. But he's stuck in there a long time. Between 2016 and last year, he's only lost one fight out of God, I don't know how many. He went from 10-1 to 21-3. So to 21-2. So only 11-1 there of a stretch. That was some stretch. Like last year in the PFL, he did very well. Knocked out Sheehan Moraes in the first round. Won the decision over Tyler Diamond. Lost a split decision to Khabibulov. I thought he won that fight, honestly. It was a very close one. It was a very criteria heavy fight, and he could have gone further. But it's a big opportunity to come back here now. I think he'll be one of the favourites coming into this season again, and coming up against Ryoji Kudo. I like him. Honestly, I watched some of his fights and I like his style. He's a counter fighter, really fast. a little bit smaller than Brendan. You know, as I mentioned, Brendan lost to Tom Duquesnoy back in the day, and a little bit of trouble with a guy so much smaller than him, so maybe that could be an issue again. He's good takedowns. Does Kudo, look, you would expect Loughnane to be a little bit better. Loughnane is just a very good fundamental fighter, good jab, seems to have added more power to his game as well over the last while. He has a few takedowns, he can do it all, really, fighting. I know he trains over in Thailand now in different places as well, but he's trained a lot with Dominic Cruz at his gym and in other places as well. So Brendan's a very, very good fighter. A lot of time for Brendan, but Kudo has as well. And having never seen him before, gone back and watched a couple of his fights, it's a dangerous fight, I think, for Brendan Loughnane. So he can't come in here and he can't take this as if it's the first step in the season in the PFL, because if he does that, he could get a very, very rude awakening. So it's a very interesting matchup and a good one, I think, for him. I said about another fight that it could be fight tonight. I think that one could be a fight of the night contender as well. That's a very, very good fight in the making. So all in all, a very, very good card. And before we go, I must ask you, who will you be betting on this weekend in the PFL, but also at UFC Fight Night? Font versus Ferreira. Can Ferreira beat the odds and defeat Font, or is Font winning inside the distance a given? Get your bets on this weekend at BetUS.com. Use the code Sherdog and get 125% bonus. BetUS.com has been taking bets for well over 25 years, and there's a reason it's the #1 UFC sportsbook. With more betting options, live betting at games, BetUS.com is your new home for UFC betting. Start the fight at BetUS.com and use that code Sherdog. Alright, everybody, that's it for me. Hope you're enjoying the PFL coverage. If you are, give us a thumbs up, give us a comment, let us know what you think, and we'll see you all next time.